Okay, third time, third time I've tried this. Maybe this time it will actually uh, complete the video. Okay, so this is your last video in PowerPoint. And this is non-Western art that I wanted to go over with you, um, mostly because on the little exam, little check mark exam, there's some terms in there that are on your handout, but I still wanted to go over them with you so you understood what it was, what the term means. So, so watch this video. I'll just go over some new terms with you, and I also included not only the non-Western traditional works by these different countries, but also some, for each one, a contemporary artist. So go ahead and get your handout that's in Module 1, Knowledge, that you need to apply for visual art vocabulary, and just know that when I pulled up a contemporary artist, there's many different styles, and just the artist you're seeing is one style of many. That doesn't mean all contemporary artists from that culture is working that way. That goes without saying, but said it anyway. Okay, so I've got my little spreadsheet here that has the vocabulary on it, and when you're doing this, taking that little exam, just it's the obvious things I'm asking you about, not the subtle things. Because the subtle things, we could look and find things, but these are like the dominant elements of art and design that you would say, oh, this is definitely Shiva repetition, okay? But there's a balance in here that I didn't talk about, radial balance. So I just want to cover a couple points. So this is, Indus Valley is actually a very ancient civilization in India, and you can see by the years 2400 to 2000, the Sumerians are around that time. They're earlier, but it's still during Mesopotamia. And they didn't start having images until about 1200, 12 to 500 BC. And so in that period, they're, aniconic means no image, no icon. And so this is on your little checklist exam. And the first thing I would say is repetition. Repeat these little flames. Shiva the destroyer. Repeat, 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 repeat. So you have a repetition of shape. Shape, definitely. And that actually causes a rhythm or a movement when you have repetition like that. So you're going around. It obviously is figurative. And this is radial balance. And radial balance is like a wheel, a spoke, a bicycle wheel. So you have a central point and everything else like radiates out from it. So that's radial balance. A lot of Plains Native Americans do this radial balance. Another word, that vocabulary that I didn't talk much about, is volume, which is, in this case, negative space shape. So negative space shape, which is volume, is defined by the positive. So this is the figure, it's positive, and then this ring is positive. So that's all I'd say about that. I mean, I could talk about the color, and it's figurative, but those are the main important elements of art and design that you should identify. Where if I go and talk about, because that was much later, Shiva. This is one of the earliest. The Great Stupa is a symbol. It's a symbol for Buddha, and it actually has like these portals, or north, south, east, west. It has a gate here, or a fence, or whatever, wall to separate Buddha from us. Buddha, of course, is the enlightened one. And then you've got a symbol here. So, and just a simple mountain, and it's just symbolic of uniting heaven and earth and an enlightened soul. Well, this is a close-up of one of the portals, and as you can see, it's very figurative. And what I wanted you to know is, early on, when they did start to get representational, it was figurative and it was very sensuous. their works early on were, I would say, very sensuous, like Shiva. All right. So this is, of course, Buddha, and this is the classic Buddha, as they say. This is the one that is, you'll see many different varieties, but that's because Buddha has different, I don't want to say personalities, but sides of self. But this is the classic enlightened Buddha in the lotus position, meditation position, third eye. And this tells you just something about who Buddha is. It was Siddhartha Gautama that became enlightened, and this represents that state. Buddha means, of course, one who has awakened. And Buddhism is it is a religion, but it's also just a general practice of how you conduct yourself. And so, of course, meditation is part of it, because in meditation you become more aware and you're mindful. And it's about change and finding solace and peace within yourself, and certainly influencing those around you. But the main tenet of Buddhism is that, nothing is fixed. Nothing is permanent. Change is possible. And of course, actions have consequences. So that's sort of the core of Buddhism. And you're going to see this little fat fella, this little fat-bellied Buddha, oftentimes, and that is because he's not the classical one that I just spoke of. He's a happy Buddha, and this actually is a master of Zen who attained the Buddha within himself, and he was a happy fellow and very joyous. And so this actually represents that state of the Buddha within you, and it's a happiness and a joyfulness. And so this, if you get this, this is supposed to be, symbolize or wish you good fortune. So here is a contemporary Indian artist, and this is, of course, sculpture. And as you can see, these are installations, and this is a lot of found objects. And so you can see here the influence of European art on this sculptor. All these found objects on the left, and then the formalism on the right. To me, that one on the right has a lot to do with minimalism. And anyway, I won't go into all the details of that, describing it, because you're not going to see those. But you're going to see this one on the left, and this is traditional Korean. So there's several things that are very important here that I didn't cover before. And these are two examples of balance. You have radial balance. This is symmetrical balance, and this is asymmetrical balance. So as you see here, if you divide this down the center, this is pretty much similar, right down the center. This to this, this to this. So when they're similar like that, mirror or almost mirror-like, this half to that half, then we call that symmetrical. Asymmetrical is this. So you have this halved. This is very different, this dragon, than this tiger or whatever he is, jaguar, but it's balanced, and that's asymmetry. And that means that the visual weight, visual weight here, is not the same as this. It's dissimilar. Where these are similar, but yet it's balanced. So that's asymmetrical. So you might say, well, how does one know if it's balanced? And it actually is quite simple. If my eyes, I'm looking at this, went off the side, went off to this side here, that means it's not balanced. A balanced work in a painting or two-dimensional, your eye just stays right there, stays, and you just keep moving from here to there to there. And so the artist is actually creating this movement within the piece so that you don't go off one end. Let's see. I'm going to talk about this a little more in a minute, but also I didn't talk about ways of creating space, pictorial space, or an illusion of space, depending how you want to talk about it. So one way is overlapping. So when you overlap this guy in front of this guy, you see space. Another way to create space or illusion is things in the distance are smaller. So these are, if I were going to talk about these, yeah, there is overlapping. It is symmetrical, and the color is significant, how they're, using color. But over here, and this is the one on your little checklist exam, I would say, okay, you have overlapping here, creating space, repeat, repeat, repeat. You have repetition of shapes. And so when you have it like this, that creates movement, repeat, repeat. So this is bringing me around to him and back around. So obviously color is important. You've got a lot of color on this side. And so on this side, you have this texture. We call that simulated texture. It's supposed to be like, the fur, or the spots on the fur. And simulated is it references, actual, real texture or real fur. So like simulated wood in your house, something like that. And then of course you have, this is all simulated too, these little, I don't know what they are. They look almost like pine needles or something. So those are all the elements that I would, and design principles I would talk about here. Yeah. So this is a contemporary artist, a Korean artist, and actually is very, very important. It's Namjoon Park, who in the 70s was actually the first artist. He was a sculptor that used video in his art form. So he's literally the father of video art. And so here's an early piece. Here you have a camera. And so what's happening is Buddha is watching Buddha. So this camera is recording, and then the Buddha is watching the Buddha on the screen. So this is early 70s. And this is a hallmark piece of his where, this is like Best Buy, because these are all TVs, this like robot thing here. And so that's early work of his. And then we've got some neon happening. And so actually Namjoon Park, he's very important because actually he was the one that said, he used the term electronic superhighway. Thank you, Namjoon Park. So that is a contemporary Korean artist. Traditional Chinese. Now, if you bring the idea of Western sensibilities and perspective to this, then you're going to miss it, because Chinese, Japanese, and some Korean, it's a different kind of pictorial space they're creating. And where Korea is more overlapping, you do have overlapping, but this is more what we call placement right up here on the picture plane. And they do not use linear perspective. Linear perspective, as you know, was developed in the Renaissance, and it creates an illusion of space. So if you're standing at the end of railroad tracks and you look down to the end, as far as you can see, well, those parallel lines converge and to create a point. So this isn't using linear perspective. This is a placement on a picture plane. Now, a picture plane is just this rectangle. But when something is located in the lower region on the picture plane, that means it's closer to you. When something is high up on the picture plane, that's further away. Okay? And what also we have here is things smaller are further away. Okay? So if, you're in, say, Rosenthal, and you're getting ready to cross campus, and your friend you see, way far away, that friend might be just a couple inches tall if they're coming from on the parking lots, the parking areas, when of course they're not. So things smaller away denote space. So how would I, and I think this is one on your exam, and how would I talk about this? Well, first of all, I'd say that this is value. Now, these little red marks, that's the chop, and that just means that printmakers, and although this may be a watercolor sumi painting, that just means that they put a stamp on their work. Instead of signing it, they put a stamp with red ink. So first thing I would say, as well as, okay, this creates space using placement on the picture plane, is that it's value. There's no color. Value is light and dark in terms of black and white, and the grays between. Do not confuse value and color, because there is value in color, and that is a property of color, just like weight or temperature. Okay, but value, the word value means dark to light in terms of black and white and the grays. So this, I would say, is a study using value. Let me see, did I leave anything else? Um, texture, sure, there is texture there. The trees. Then you've got some contrast of this texture against this sort of smooth or just this atmospheric effect. So you've got that. Everything has to be well proportioned. So this, proportion I would say is relevant because if I draw a line here where all this dark is, and dark is heavier in weight, visual weight, this 2/3 is like balance. So proportion is always relative. So that is traditional Chinese, and this is around 1830, a very popular image of the wave by this artist. And I'm going to show an earlier image where other earlier artists, Japanese artists, were doing this, but his wave is just particularly attractive. So let's use those same principles. Yes, this is very a lot of shapes. And then here's this boat. You see those little men down there? So here this boat is close to us, or lower on the picture plane, so that's closer, where this one is smaller, further away. I don't know what that is. Is that like a wave or a mountain? I don't know. But whatever, it's in the distance because it's smaller. It's not in the distance because it's higher up, just because it's smaller. And so this scale issue here, obviously, because look at that wave. And here's these little fellows down here. So scale obviously is an issue here. That's all I can think about that. But I want to show you one of the earlier. So this is some earlier Japanese wave prints. And I use the word perspective here. And that's because the perspective is bird's eye view. And that simply means that in perspective, if you're looking up at something, like you're a worm on the ground and you're looking up at, say, a skyscraper, that's worm's eye view. It's very different than bird's eye view. If you're a bird looking down, then you see the top of the building. So this is bird's eye view perspective where we're looking down on top of this wave. So that I just wanted to show you that this is earlier prints on this subject were created. This is pretty similar. This is classical Japanese, where it's very shape-oriented. At all these shapes here, these patterns and shapes, the shape of her hair, that black shape, and they're known for the beauty of the linear quality. Their line work is exquisite. And you could say, well, they're outlined, but not really. You could say, well, that's a cartoon. No, not really. It's a beautiful, expressive line quality, and it's very minimal how they reduce the figure to very few lines. So this shows you where anime, which students are crazy about, that style comes from. You would say, well, this is sort of cartoon-esque, but really it's not. It's just, some cultures like flat and shapes. So that just shows you what that source is for the anime images that so many students and young people like to draw. And of course, you already know this contemporary Japanese artist, Murakami, because he turned super flat, and he's very, very famous and very wealthy. And and so as you look at these wonderful little I don't know, creatures, happy faces, and these little happy faces, you can also see still flat patterns, colorful. There's one of his works behind him, and you can also see an influence of pop art here. You wouldn't see those little happy faces. Ancient Africa is such a huge continent and so many and diverse. European language, we have one common language family. On the continent of Africa, you have over 1,000. So it's a very, very large, complex place, a lot of different geographic regions and a lot of different styles taking place. This is the mask is a very popular image that you see a lot because it's so powerful. And so if I was looking at this mask series, you see, as we talked about with Picasso, these artists knew, craftspeople knew the power of design. So this is actually not simulated, but actual texture. And then they dealt a lot with shapes. And so you've got proportion of this shape to that shape, to that shape, to that shape, or this shape to this. So that's all I'm going to say about that, because this is the one on your exam, and there's a term here I want to talk about again, which is volume. So as you look at this, you see this shape, this negative space shape, and this where it's chopped. Those are all shapes. You could call this a line, but I'm going to call it a shape. So if this was solid, that'd be a very different piece. This is volume. And it's repeating that shape, by the way. That's almost a C or U. So I would say that this has volume. I would say that this has repeating. I would say this has repeating shapes here. That's also creating some movement, bringing my eye up. I would say that you see this shape here in that direction is the opposite of this direction. So there's a lot of complex design happening here, as well as proportion. And this would be worn on something on top of your head. It would be attached to in a ceremony. And so you could talk certainly about proportion. And generally speaking, this region, it's in thirds. So you'd say, well, this is 1/3, and then here's 1/3, and then there's 1/3. Not perfect equidistant thirds, but certainly thirds. You could say that, so proportion is very important. You could say that this is one shape, or you could break this into two. So you've got a lot of movement happening with the way that flips, and then this bringing you around. So this is all those terms: proportion, shape, repetition, volume, even rhythm. And it's a beautiful design. Here's some contemporary African artist that is very well known now. And he's from Ghana, and he uses originally just like bottle tops, pop-up can tops, anything he could find to use in a large number, by the way. So this, I want to call it a tapestry. It's actually made out of found objects and metals, and it's quite beautiful, his work. And this is another contemporary artist that is this is mixed media. And so you can see he's a little more, Western in this portrait, but you see this paper, he finds this paper and then works it in and paints on top. So this is also mixed media artist. Okay. So this is the Olmec, and you wouldn't know this because, someone's not standing next to this. And the Olmec is one of the earliest civilizations in Mesoamerica. And this is scale because these are huge, many of them. They're colossal, monumental. Like if I stood next to it, I may be like this tall right there. Can involve his nose or right. They're huge. And so you would say scale is relevant because of the size of it. Also mass. We didn't talk about mass. This is mass. No volume. Mass. A lump. Beautiful carving, by the way. I'm not sure what kind of stone this is. Look at the delineation of the mouth and the eyes. So this is the Olmecs, and it was one of the earliest civilizations that you find these big heads everywhere. But I also wanted to show you one of their figurines, like here's a seated figure. And again, you see it's mass. It's not like an open form that we just looked at. So, but you can see this region of the world. They do like patterns, okay? So this is Aztec, same region. And I'm not going to pronounce this because I will not pronounce it correctly, and it will be embarrassing. So if you're Latin American, Mesoamerican, know how to pronounce this. And she's very, very well known. She is very, this goddess is a goddess of extremes. Like she gives life, she takes life. Very powerful goddess. But you can see on this, and I have a detail, it's actually a series of relief, it's patterns. I know this is sculptural, but there's a lot of patterns taking place, and that's coming out of that region. And here's a close-up of that. You see? Mhm. Now, this is contemporary Mexican graffiti art, and you can see that's a fun piece. Patterns, patterns. And here's a contemporary sculptor, and I wanted to show you that. This is ceramic, and you can see how, again, a lot of different styles happening, not just like one stereotypic folk art. Folk art means usually that a culture is using a style that was popular much earlier in the civilization, and untrained artists just sort of picked up on it, stylized it, then repeat it. That's what we call folk art. But this is some pretty sophisticated sculpture installation. Native Americans in this country, this is Northwest Coast, and the Northwest Coast is Oregon or Washington State, and those Native Americans were settled and permanent. They didn't move like the Plains Indians did, where they would follow buffalo, or because of the seasons, the Plains Indians would move, and that's why they lived in teepees, where these built permanent structures. And so and these totem poles, that is Northwest Coast. So just looking at this, you can see definitely patterns, color, proportion of this unit to this unit to this unit. And then here is an example of one of their structures. Here's, and you can see this is symmetrical balance. This is the same as that. So this is about patterns, it's about color, it's about, and a variety. Variety is usually present. A variety of shapes, a variety of mask heads on the totem pole, not so much on the dwelling. This is variety because this is texture, variety of texture. Here you have the actual, and this is a Kachina doll, Zuni. You have the actual texture of the feathers. And then you have the simulated texture on the surface, these polka dots, which is colorful. It's sort of hard to see. It's like pink and yellow. So I would say color is important here. But it's a nice contrast between the simulated texture here of the dots and the actual texture of the feathers. So I'm looking at words like variety, contrast, texture, simulated, and actual. And then you already know contemporary Native American is one quick to see Smith. We end with Australia, and Australia's native people are the Aborigines. And Aboriginal culture, this is one of their cave paintings, and it's exquisite, it's beautiful. By the way, and that's like 20,000 years old. If you have ever been, or you get out a chance to go to the Midwest in our country, there are a lot of, and they're not just in national parks, you'll see it when you're driving down one of the major highways, particularly the Anasazi. There's a lot of cave drawings or rock drawings, prints that you will see from the Anasazi from a long time ago. I don't know exactly the years on that. But this is like 20,000 years old, this cave right here. So this is their tradition, is this dot technique that they like to use, the dot painting. And they're still very popular today with a lot of the artists. I don't want to call them folk artists, but they just want to carry on that tradition. And so this actually is a beautiful work that's, and it's a traditional piece that is in your little test there. And so when you look at this, you say, okay, well, obviously color is important, shape is important, but rhythm is important, because if I look at these, boom, 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 That's movement, that's rhythm. This drrr, that's rhythm. So a lot of rhythm in this piece, these dots. Um, and it's just a beautiful piece as I look at that. The more I look at it, the more I just love that. Um, this is the next slide is our last one. And this is the next to last slide. It just shows you some artists there today that are carrying on that tradition. There's a lot of art coming out, contemporary art coming out of that country that is pretty edgy, but this is the traditional um, Aborigine style. And I want to close with this Aboriginal art. And it's like probably a watercolor. I couldn't find the artist's name. So you can see there's a lot of different styles. And I don't think I need to explain this story right here with the gold arches. Um, but that's where we end. And if you look at this very quickly and pick up on some of those new terms, you're going to be fine. You can take that little test, check test, and send it in to me. And, well, I guess that's it for me. So, over and out.